keeping you company this Ramadan.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome back, dear listeners and viewers. My next guest for this morning is a very, very special guest whom I've been wanting to bring to you for a while now. We welcome Professor Haidar Eid. He's a South African Palestinian author and associate professor of post-colonial and postmodern literature at Gaza's Al-Aqsa University, or was, I should say, because the university is currently no more. His books are Worlding Postmodernism, Interpretive Possibilities of Critical Theory, Countering the Palestinian Nakba, One State for All, and most recently, Decolonizing the Palestinian Mind. And that's the book that we want to discuss today, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh to you, Prof. Eid. Thank you for joining us.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you so much for having me on your show, Aisha.
Prof. Eid, I'm currently reading your book. I was hoping to finish reading it before this interview, but I think it deserves time. So I'll be very honest and admit I'm still reading it. But you begin with a sentence that really gave me chills. I'm standing over the ruins of a house in Gaza City, peering at the horizon. Those are your opening words of this book, and one could be forgiven for thinking, given those opening words, that the book is about the current genocide in Gaza, where you were living until fairly recently. But actually, Decolonizing the Palestinian Mind is not solely or not even primarily about the 2023 attack on Gaza. Rather, it is a critique of the Oslo Accords, the Bantustans that have been created by Israeli imperialism in the so-called pursuit of a two-state solution, and the tokenism really that exists, or the tokenization that has happened of the Palestinian struggle. You're calling for a change, a shift in consciousness about this struggle and about the future of a Palestinian state, of a Palestinian population. So, can you, in your words, tell me what prompted this particular topic, decolonizing the Palestinian mind?
If you allow me, Aisha, but before I start talking about, the
Sure.
book and my experience of writing the book and getting it published before the eruption of the current genocide, I think it is important for us, and I made it, I promised my friends, my comrades in Gaza, and even my family, that every single time I talk about the book, that I should open by mentioning what is happening right now in Gaza.
Absolutely.
Yeah, my personal experience. As you said in your introduction, I am I'm professor of cultural studies and literature, working at what used to be Al-Aqsa University. About 6 universities have been completely destroyed in Gaza, and more than 450 schools. This is part of what the Palestinian academic and intellectual Karma Nabulsi calls scholasticized, getting rid of, all schools, academic
Mhm.
institutions of education. Because as you and your listeners know very well, that Palestinians are educated, and the most important weapon for Palestinians is education. And I think it's very important for people to understand that even if Israel abides by international law and decides to start a ceasefire right now, that
Mhm.
doesn't mean the end of genocide taking place right now in Gaza. Back in December, when I was in Gaza, there was a report by the Washington Post saying that if we have a ceasefire now, that is to say in December, it would take more than 1 year to remove the rubble of
Mhm.
the destroyed houses in Gaza, and it would take between 8 and 10 years to reconstruct and rebuild Gaza. Recently, that was in December. Recently, a UN report states that it would take between 10 and 15 years to remove the rubble, and between 70 and 90 years to rebuild Gaza. 70% of Gaza houses, housing units, institutions, academic institutions, cultural institutions, hospitals, clinics, etc., etc. 70% of them have been destroyed, Aisha. So, so you can imagine the situation right now in Gaza. I was evacuated together with my family and other South African citizens who were stuck in Gaza. We were evacuated in December. So I've been here in South Africa for about 3-4 months right now, and I'm still conflicted. My family is still conflicted. The death toll has risen, as you mentioned in your introduction, to more than 33,000 people. It is like if you look at South Africa and make a sort of a comparison, it's like killing more than 4 million South Africans within the last 6 months. So I want people to think about that. You mentioned figures, and every single person who has been killed has a story to tell, has a family, has a love story, has children, has kids, has parents, etc., etc. So people need to understand that it's not just talking about figures. We are talking about more than 14,000 children that have been killed. We're talking about more than 10,000 women. So, this is why I always say I don't want to start by talking about my book, about theorizations, about political solutions. No, it is a lived life that people are going through every single day. And I think that was important to begin with. And if I talk about my book, and the book is in fact, Aisha, both personal and political. In a way, it is my testimony, the first two chapters, or rather the prologue. It is, my testimony of being a Palestinian refugee residing in what has been called by mainstream human rights organizations the largest open-air prison on earth. And now I'm calling it an extermination camp. Literally,
Yeah.
Gaza is an extermination camp. But the book is also a voice, I would say, from within, offering, I don't want to use the word hope because I don't know what kind of hope we can talk about, but it's an attempt to offer a way out of the man-made quagmire in Palestine. Yes, Aisha.
Yeah. So you've been very, very critical of the Oslo Accords, of citing them as being a tool of furthering the colonialist agenda, and you, among others, including our own Desmond Tutu and former US President Jimmy Carter, have likened the enclaves in the West Bank, which have been increasingly encroached upon by settlers. You've likened them to the former Bantustans here in South Africa. As I said, what was the impetus for this particular topic? Why decolonizing the Palestinian mind? What is the shift in consciousness you're hoping to bring about here?
Right. I think people need to understand, and I have been hearing this from South African politicians and very few activists claiming that the only way forward, and this is what the Americans are saying right now, by the way, that the only way forward is, the two-state solution, without really understanding what that means. And that means, on which Israel, by the way, is not accepting. If we accept that, based on the Palestinian leadership understanding of the two-state solution, it mainly means the establishment of a Palestinian state on only 22% of historic Palestine. That is to say, in the lands Israel occupied in 1967, the Gaza Strip and the West Bank. So that leaves 78% of historic Palestine to the Zionist entity, to apartheid, genocidal Israel. Now, people find it strange when I tell them that, but that is what the Oslo Accords are all about. But to add insult to injury, the Oslo Accords and the two-state solutions in particular completely ignore the right of return of the Palestinian refugees who are entitled, in fact, in accordance with international law, to their right of return. I myself, I am a refugee. Both my parents are refugees from the Zernuga village, which was ethnically cleansed and even destroyed in 1948. Both my parents grew up, sorry, they didn't grow up. They grew up in the Zernuga village, but then they spent the rest of their lives in a refugee camp, in the Nusayrat refugee camp, where I myself was born in 1964. Both my parents died in 2005, dreaming of their right of return, dreaming of the implementation of United Nations Resolution 194, which calls for our right of return and compensation. So Oslo doesn't address that right, unfortunately. Add to that, Ayesha, that there are 1.4 million Palestinian citizens of the State of Israel. They are third-class citizens of the State of Israel who are not treated as equal citizens, exactly like Ashkenazi Jews and Mizrahi Jews. Israel, by definition, is the state of Jews only, which leaves us as third-class citizens in the State of Israel. I myself am not a state, or rather, I'm not a citizen of
Citizen
that
of
state.
Israel. Yes.
Yeah. So I think, these are facts that people need to understand. And then I'll answer your second question and talk more about the Oslo Accords and the alternative I'm trying to offer in my book.
Yes, please elucidate a little bit about that alternative, because you've mentioned, look, the Oslo Accords talk about only 22% of historical Palestine. And then even that has been encroached upon. There is no right of return, according to the Oslo Accords, of the now hundreds of thousands of Palestinians living in the diaspora. And thirdly, you've mentioned that there are Palestinian citizens of Israel who are literally third-class citizens there in an apartheid state. So all of these elements need to be brought together into any kind of potential future solution. What is the solution your book is offering?
Yeah, that's a very good question, and I really want to talk about that. But I think, just before addressing that question, I think it's important for people to understand. In my book, I try to examine the issue of Palestinian leadership,
Yes.
both pre and post 2006 legislative council elections, because what we are going through right now in Gaza cannot be understood without being put into context, and that historical context and political context is extremely important. I think the book also it tries in a way to address the transformation of Palestinian society after the formation of the Palestinian Authority. And that is my answer to your first question about, why decolonize the Palestinian mind? Because I believe that decolonizing the mind is a precondition for the decolonization of the land itself. And the problem with the Palestinian mind, it has been under tremendous attack of especially after the signing of the Oslo Accords, trying to convince Palestinians that the only solution forward is the formation of a Bantustan, calling it a sovereign independent Palestinian state. And I think it's important for people to understand that. The book includes ideas on the strategies for resisting the occupation, apartheid, and settler colonialism, not only resisting the occupation of the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, but also it envisages a future de-Zionized state in Palestine, a future de-Osloized state in Palestine, where all inhabitants of historic Palestine live in harmony and in equality. The book sheds light on the on the large scale non-violent movement, which has included hundreds of peaceful protests in Palestine. Because when people think of Palestine now, they only think of, violence.
Yes.
But no, there are peaceful protests in Palestine. But unfortunately, that is unheard of in the rest of the world. Again, the book discusses the real possibilities for peace within the context of Israel's continued blockade, medieval blockade of Gaza that has been going on since 2006. Brutal, regular onslaughts. Look, in 2008, 2009, more than 1,400 civilians were killed. In 2012, within a week, more than 200 people were killed. In 2014, 2021, 2023. And I think people need to understand that it is impossible to solve the Palestinian question without the implementation of our right of return. And that can only happen within the framework of a secular democratic state in historic Palestine.
Inshallah. Please hold that thought, particularly the de-Zionization and the de-Osloification or de-Osloization of Palestine. We need to go for a quick ad break, inshallah, and we'll come back to you after that, Prof. Haidar.
All right, thank you.
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
This Ramadan, join hands with Muslim hands to make a meaningful difference in the lives of millions worldwide. Your zakah and sadaqah can be the lifeline for those in need. Together we can nourish the hungry in South Africa and across the globe, offer clean water to impoverished communities, empower women with sustainable livelihoods, and bring relief to families grappling with the aftermath of natural disasters and conflict. Be their beacon of hope today. Connect with us at muslimhands.org.za or dial 021 633 6413 to extend your support.
Freedom Stationery supply Marlin and Marlin Kids pens to me and my school friends. They supply just about everything we need to help us get a better education, from books to files to rulers. In fact, any any accessory we need. Freedom Stationery. Education for the nation. What does accessory mean?
This Ramadan, join the Al-Imdad Foundation as we spread the winds of generosity in 40 countries across the globe. Sponsor a food hamper for 800 Rand and ensure a fasting family has food to break their fast. Donate your zakat or lillah and ease the pangs of hunger experienced by thousands of widows, orphans and destitute Muslims globally. Donate online at alimdad.com or call 0861 786 243 for more information.
Shimmer, sparkle, captivate. Nothing less than a masterpiece. Droplets of gold inspires precious design. Platinum bursts with intricate freshness, and every pure diamond becomes more than just a girl's best friend. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, where timeless dreams become a reality. Come to us. We tailor-make designer gold, platinum, and diamond jewelry. Trade in or remodel your old gold. Clad yourself with classy name-branded watches. We offer insurance valuation and free zakat calculation. Visit us at 534 Ridge Road, Overport, or call 031 208 9142. Voda Gold Gem Jewelers, manufacturers of fine gold and diamond jewelry.
You are listening to Salam Media live from our headquarters in South Africa. This is Salam Media, keeping you company this Ramadan.
Emergivac Sharia, South Africa's first and only fully Sharia-compliant family medical takaful and wellness product, wishes all listeners Ramadan Kareem. Download the Emergivac app today and get free immediate access to the Emergivac Sharia collection of du'as, hadith, Quran, and much more. Welcome back, dear listeners and viewers. We're talking with Prof. Haidar Eid. He's a South African Palestinian author, and his most recent book, the one we're discussing, is called Decolonising the Palestinian Mind. Prof. Eid, before we went to the ad break, you were talking about peaceful protests in Palestine and also the de-Zionization and the de-Osloization of Palestine. I must tell you that I've witnessed peaceful protests in Palestine, both in Jerusalem, in the precincts of Al-Aqsa Mosque on Jum'ah, and also in Nablus and in Jenin on my visits there. So yes, very much something that doesn't make the mainstream media headlines. But you say something interesting in your book, and I'm going to read it. The de-Osloization of Palestine for most Palestinian activists has become a precondition for the creation of peace with justice. That requires a redefinition of the Palestinian cause as an anti-colonial struggle against a system of settler colonialism and apartheid, and reunification of the three components of the Palestinian people, namely Gaza and the West Bank refugees in the diaspora, and Palestinian citizens of Israel. And you go on to say that the first steps towards this process were taken at the World Conference Against Racism in Durban in 2001. Now, you've spoken of the creation of a secular state. I'm assuming that when you talk about a secular state, there would be provision for people of all faiths within that state, including, of course, the Palestinian Muslims, Christians, and indeed Palestinian Jews.
No, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, freedom of worship, a freedom of religion, a freedom of belief, a freedom of thought, etc., etc. I completely agree. Look, I've read your constitution here in South Africa, and I think, and I agree that it is one of the, if not the most democratic and progressive constitutions in theory. And I think we Palestinians have learned from lessons from South Africa, and we've learned from your mistakes as well. And I think one of the biggest lessons, I would say, the most important lessons that we have learned, is to reject, the idea of separating people based on their, ethnic and racial or religious background. In our Islamic history, everybody knows Al-Andalus. Even under the Ottoman Empire, people of all faiths and religions lived, in harmony together. And now we live in the 21st century. And this idea of separating, people based on their racial background, ethnic background, etc., is outdated, in fact. And I think you in South Africa expected the whole world to reject the idea of, Bantustanization of South Africa. The infamous four Bantustans of South Africa.
Yes.
Not a single country in the world recognized any of those infamous Bantustans, with one exception. And I'm sure that you can guess it was apartheid Israel that recognized one of those Bantustans. And I think it was the Bantustans of Botswana. So it is very important, yes. It's very important for people to understand that. But I also want, since we are talking about, future solutions of de-Osloized, de-Zionized Palestine, the book, in a way, tackles the controversial question: is a one-state solution becoming more likely now? Is it possible? And I think, in my book, I maintain that Edward Said, the late Palestinian intellectual, Edward Said's political input is essential in understanding this political reality. Edward Said argued for a secular democratic state in historic Palestine. And he reached that conclusion only after the signing of the Oslo Accords in 1993. So this book, I would say, it is written by a Palestinian myself, a Palestinian voice, following Edward Said's call on Palestinian writers to narrate the Palestinian narrative. In other words, for people who are interested, the book is an authentic Palestinian voice learning from your experience in South Africa, from the Algerian experience, from the Vietnamese experience, but with more emphasis on the South African experience. We've learned from the likes of Steve Biko, Nelson Mandela, Desmond Tutu, but we've also learned from the likes of Frantz Fanon and Ngugi wa Thiong'o. Again, back to your point about the title, Decolonizing the Palestinian Question actually builds on the ideas of Ngugi, the Kenyan writer, intellectual Ngugi wa Thiong'o, when he wrote Decolonizing the Mind.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for that, Prof. Eid. We don't have very much time left, but I'm going to encourage viewers and listeners to please get your book and read it, because I think it is very important. It does, as you've said, build a lot on the South African experience, but also other decolonializing projects or decolonization projects around the world. And where is it available? Where can people in South Africa get hold of it?
People can get hold of it online, takealot.com, or
Right.
from the Commune. They can go to the Commune, a progressive bookstore, and it is available there right now.
That's in Braamfontein in Johannesburg, the commune,
That's-
and also online at Take a Lot. That's where you can get hold of Decolonizing the Palestinian Mind by Professor Haidar Eid. Professor Eid, thank you so much for joining us this morning. Shukran jazilan. Any last thoughts before I let you go?
I think it's important for South Africans to know that we Palestinians really appreciate the bold step taken by South Africa, the government, South Africa, the people, the BDS coalition, all of them who have supported us, and by taking apartheid Israel to the ICJ. South Africa has said it very loudly that it is time to take apartheid Israel, genocidal Israel, to account, in fact. And I think one last point, Ayesha, I think I need to reiterate that while colonization is a common thread in Palestinian discussions and South African discussions, whether in Palestine 48, 67, or even in the diaspora, or even in South Africa, post-apartheid South Africa, there are differing notions of how decolonization should be understood and achieved. And I think the most important step that everybody should be following when addressing, the Palestinian question is that decolonizing the Palestinian mind is the first step towards the decolonization of Palestine. And thank you so much again, Ayesha.
Thank you very much. Shukran jazilan, jazakallah khair. And may I wish you all of the best, Kareem, for the last remaining days of Ramadan, you and your family here in South Africa, as well as family left behind and friends left behind in Gaza. We make dua for them all, inshallah, and perhaps, inshallah, with the collective dua of the ummah. We know dua changes qadr. So inshallah, Allah will change the qadr of the Palestinian people as a whole, and particularly right now, the urgent situation of the people in Gaza. Prof. Eid, also may I wish you a very, very peaceful and blessed Eid next week in South Africa, inshallah. And we thank you. We thank you for not only for being with us, but for choosing South Africa as the country you came to, because we need minds like yours. And we're very grateful to you for that. Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you so much, Ayesha, and hopefully I'll see you again. Thank you so much.
Inshallah. And with that, dear listeners, we go to our next ad break before we bring you our next guests.